Well, welcome. Welcome to the SSPI webinar, High Achievers in Turbulent Times. My name is Robert Bell, and I'm Executive Director of Space and Satellite Professionals International. Now, for those who don't know us, we have been connecting the people of the invisible and indispensable industry called space and satellite for well over 3 decades. SSPI is the largest, the most international, and cross-disciplinary network of individuals and companies in the world. It's where the people of space and satellite do business, whether they're new hires or seasoned executives, in startups on the launch pad and in established companies with billions of revenue. These people of the industry are our mission. And because they make up an industry whose technology and whose capabilities are indispensable to the world. Now, SSPI is also the only organization that promotes the enormous value of space and satellite through our Better Satellite World campaign, which tells dramatic stories of our technologies and companies making a better world. Now, those stories overturn misconceptions that hold the industry back. They inspire people and attract new ones to the industry. And so through the stories we tell and the people we serve, SSPI is inspiring the growth of a $1.1 trillion space economy. This webinar is part of our Making Leaders campaign, which helps the industry to attract, to develop, and to retain the talented people that it needs to keep innovating. The campaign is made possible by the support of leading corporate members and content sponsors, including Airbus Defence and Space, AVL Technologies, EchoStar, Eutelsat, Hughes, OneWeb Satellites, Pearson, Planet, SES, and ST Engineering, iDirect. And today we will be speaking with 2 striking examples of high achievers operating in turbulent times. They are Thomas van den Driessche, who is the President and Chief Commercial Officer of ST Engineering, iDirect, and Nicole Robinson, who is Senior Vice President for Global Government at SES. Now, still at mid-career, they have achieved major professional growth while leading large-scale transformations of businesses to which they have devoted years of their lives. They have something else in common as well. A commitment to make the industry better through leadership of the board of Space and Satellite Professionals International. So welcome to the program, and congratulations to both of you for being named as the volunteer chair, and that's Thomas, and the volunteer president, Nicole of SSPI.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
So absolutely, so let's get into our conversation. Neither of you started out in the space and satellite business. What is the path that brought you into it? Why don't we start with Nicole?
Well, Robert, I'd say some of the greatest things in my life have happened by accident. You know, you like to think you're in control of your own destiny and the architect of your own destiny, but sometimes things just are presented to you and you try to step forward and take advantage of it best you can. When I came out of college, I joined an organization called the U.S. Army Center of Military History. At the time, we were working to create the National Museum of the U.S. Army. So spent a lot of time with veterans, those who had served, you know, in honor of their country for many years. We did the 60th anniversary of D-Day events in Normandy and had the opportunity to bunk with some female officers there in an Army Life Support Unit, whole other story. But needless to say, it gave a lot of personal exposure to the service and the sacrifice of men and women in uniform when I've never personally worn a uniform myself. And a few years later, ended up working in support of Joint Forces Command for General Dynamics. And this time, now having a broader exposure to soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, Coast Guardsmen as well. So more of a joint, diverse environment, really started to appreciate what each of those different servicemen and women do bring forward. And just develop such a big sense of appreciation and an interest in continuing to serve that community. In 2007, when I learned of the opportunity with SES, they were looking for someone with business development, marketing, this sort of experience in the B2G environment. It was a logical fit, so I sort of stumbled into the space and satellite industry, and I'm stuck. I love it. I'm not leaving it. I really enjoyed it and the journey that has brought me here by happenstance.
Yeah, I was going to give you that warning that generally speaking, once somebody stumbles into the industry, they find it very difficult to stumble out again. So There's something magical about it. But that's very interesting. So from a nonprofit start, you ended up then moving over into the contracting side, and the big prime contractors that serve the government, and then into satellite. That's an interesting journey. Thomas, how about you?
Yeah.
Well, a very different story there. I am an engineer by degree, and I never really wanted to sit in a lab and develop, although I started to be fascinated by that. But I had this fascination for sales and marketing, and I just wanted to sell and bring to market very technical, very innovative stuff that I thought, well, you have to be an engineer in order to sell this. This is so complicated that, that it's impossible. And I had this fascination for those type of things. So I did start out in the audio-visual world, where we had the upcoming digital projection systems for cinemas and LED walls and HD displays and all of that stuff. And I did product management in that industry for some time. And I kind of discovered that those things are meaningless without the applications behind them. So for instance, without having the IP connected to the audio visual stuff, those applications that are, so I found something very similar in the industry where you know, the satellites by themselves and the innovation behind them are enabling really other types of applications, being broadband or television or any other of those wonderful things that we know today that will help our world into a better place. So for me, it was one of those other fascinating things that you could only sell with deep technical knowledge and that had these layers of applications on top of them. That brought me to the satellite industry.
Yeah, the sales engineer is the bedrock of this business, and it's a very unusual skill set. It's a very unusual skill set, but we can't live without them. I'm interested in what you said, because I think that one of the problems we face inside this industry is that we do think about our toys, our spacecraft in the sky, and our antennas and our modems and our cameras and all the other things that go on, and we forget that they actually have no value in and of themselves. Their value is in what they produce for the world, and it's and what they produce for the world is pretty much running the entire planet. You can't do it without that. So you both alluded to this, but let me just drill into it a little bit. What have been the personal and sort of professional drivers of your career that got you to where you are today? You know, as we go through life, we start, at first we're interested in everything and we care about everything, and then gradually we discover what actually we care most about and how that's going to drive us. So Thomas, what have you learned about that along the way?
Well, one of my biggest drivers was to capture a market or to enable something new. I was alluding to that a little bit. And it turned out that I was wrong, by the way. You don't have to be an engineer to do that. You can, as long as you understand what you're trying to achieve, the bigger picture, what you're trying to change in the world, you can do that. It's a goal setting type of thing, right? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I am so relieved, because yeah, I've been faking it for all these years. So go ahead. I know. We all know that, but that's why you're on that side. But no, you don't have to be an engineer. Obviously, we have all of the rocket scientists, all the engineers behind the innovation, but we have many other people that are, you know, where the ambition is to capture a market or to put a product into a certain position, or to enable something that hasn't been done before, or to change the world into something better. And those are all motivations that we found in the satellite industry, and they're very driving. They're very, very interested. We had the conversation before, Robert, that the satellite industry is, it's the long tail of the telecommunication industry. That's the conversation we had more than 10 years ago, but it's still valid. There are certain elements of telecommunication on our planet and beyond that we can only achieve by adding satellite into the mix. So it's the long tail enabler of, and the long tail means that there's, you know, the last 5% or the last this and this, that are sometimes economically unviable, and still we find a way to do that by shooting things in space. And all of this is an enormous drive beyond the innovation that has motivated me, at least, to take part in this.
Interesting. Nicole, how about you? What are you looking back and thinking about today? What have been your personal and professional drivers to get where you are?
Yeah, I think having a sense that what I'm doing or what I'm involved in actually matters at some level. Just harkening back to that experience for the Army, and then of course Joint Forces Command, and now in more of a global government context, feeling a sense of meaning in the job I'm doing. One of my favorite things to do is to build teams and to lead them towards a common goal or a growth objective. And I think when you believe in what you're doing and for whom you're doing it, I think that cause can transcend a team. And they're much more likely to line up and be successful. You can't fake it. It's something you actually have to feel, and the folks can see that when they work for you and with you. I can't recall who said this early on in my career, but there was a suggestion there that so much of your career trajectory is about proving yourself. We almost sometimes forget about being yourself. There's that integral element that each of us individually brings forward. And I think, your why, what's at the heart of it that gives you your drive for what you're doing each and every day. It needs to matter to you. And that's certainly very important to me and has been throughout my career so far.
It's very, very interesting. I've had the privilege of asking that question. Sorry, just a second, I'm messing around with this stupid device because something's coming at me. I had the privilege of asking that question to quite a few people, from Gwen Shotwell to Tori Bruno at ULA, and the answers are always fascinating, but they come down to the kinds of things you both said. It's you are driven by the power of putting together people and enabling them to succeed and creating something that never existed before. So I think it was Paul Gask who told me about the story about just they had some kind of horrible failure where whatever it was that they were building, just blew up or something. And he couldn't sleep that night, so he came into the office. His entire team was there because they couldn't stand it. They wanted it to work so badly. Let's talk business for a minute here. You're both managing businesses with some very serious growth objectives at a very difficult time in our industry and in the world. So where do you see revenue growth coming from, just in general terms, for your sectors over the next 3 to 5 years? Nicole, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Certainly in suggesting that we're both managing businesses with serious growth objectives. Certainly Thomas has billions that follow his beyond that my team is respectively responsible for. But in any case, back in 2017, I guess it was, when we more formally structured our global government organization under SES, our CEO now, Steve Collar, gave us the objective of growing by doubling our revenues within a period of 5 years. So that necessitated a double-digit growth, near double-digit growth year after year. Fortunately, we've been able to deliver that each year. This is a challenging year with COVID, with a number of different dynamics that are impacting our industry. We are still, very much looking forward to delivering strong growth, but we have to get a sense of where is that growth coming from, as you said, and what's going to drive those numbers in the years to come. So for us, at least in the global government arena as it pertains to data, having access to data is becoming a critical trend that is growing demand for us. So if we think in the government domain, morale, welfare, and recreation, for example, we call it MWR. In many cases, this is global troop missions where there's an appreciation now by various ministries of defense that in order to retain talented soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardsmen, they're going to need to be able to provide access to critical connectivity when forward deployed, as the up and coming uniformed service personnel have when they're home. So if you think of the younger generations now who are enlisting or they're becoming commissioned officers, access to data is like access to water. They have to have it. This is their WhatsApp, their social media tools, staying connected with friends and loved ones at home and when forward deployed has a direct and correlating impact on how long they stay in uniform in commitment to that service. So we're seeing a growth in those MWR programs. And I say that just as an example, in the government domain, it's that access to data. Bridging digital divide now is another area where it's about scale and speed, providing data to locations that currently don't have connectivity so they can participate in e-governance, the elections for their populations, their connection for school, not just during the COVID crisis, but also just in locations where there otherwise isn't, brick and mortar buildings to be able to participate in education, having connectivity to do that. So that remains important to us just in our core of what we're trying to do in the market, but also to take advantage of the growth. Other areas where we've invested significantly in a differentiated part of our architecture with the Empower fleet that's launching here end of next year in service early 2022 is being able to provide for governments that steerable capability, that easily configured follow me beam capability that allows platforms participating in surveillance, whether in air or at sea, so they can operate in a multi-sensor environment, also have access to live, full streaming, full motion video while doing that, keeping troops out of harm's way, but still having that surveillance capability. So it's a bit about speed and scale in providing data in one area, but it's also about providing a unique capability for those rapidly growing bandwidth hungry platforms involved in the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance space. Maybe too much in the government domain, but that's at least where we see it coming from in the years to come.
I remember years ago sitting in a DoD workshop, and an admiral in the U.S. Navy very proudly explained about a great new implementation they had for an aircraft carrier where they were able to get 8 megabits a second to the carrier. And all the private sector people in the audience kind of turned and looked at each other and said, there's 5,000 people on a carrier. 8 megabits? Of course, now it's a completely different world, but it was just, really, it's exciting to know the government has figured out that that isn't going to get it done, isn't going to get the job done. Thomas, so no pressure, but you got this $1 billion responsibility. So, how are you going to meet that?
Well, we have to accept that the world is changing place, right? And it's going to be very disruptive and volatile. And this has been one of those periods that are unprecedented. And you have to reflect on that and look at, what you believe was true and reevaluate that. And to be fair, I have always built strategy from, even in volatile and disruptive environments, strategy to find, where is the truth in the matter, which is, I like Nicole's explanation, because one of the pillars of our truth is that we do believe that people and connectivity is extremely important. And we've seen this truth in the current environment. We rely so much now, more than anything, we rely on our connectivity to do this, or to talk to our partners and customers and be important in the market. So that's one of those absolute truths. We're trying to find absolute truths, which don't really exist, but you have to have a strategy around what you truly believe in. And that's one of those things. And I can give you examples of how that changed. I mean, looking back more than 10 years ago, when I was in UTech, before we joined iDirect, was one of our absolute truths was that people would watch more hours of television and actually have higher quality, more channels and higher quality, so that the bandwidth consumption of television would only increase, right? This was one of our absolute truths, which was true up to the point that, you had a lot of streaming and Netflix type of stuff. And then that truth became less obvious. After that, people would consume more data any place and anywhere in time, right? And that's one of our absolute truths that we've built the satellite communication industry upon, that people would consume more data anytime, and that they would be less obvious to sit on a train or on an airplane or on a boat and not have access to the internet. And everybody believed that that was absolutely true. But now, of course, we have the issue. The connectivity part obviously is still there, but so much of our business was relying on movement, people moving around, going to live events, and people going on an airplane and on a boat and so on. So what we thought was absolutely true kind of was disrupted in a fundamental way. So in line with what Nicole said, we know that that's coming back in a different format, but the connectivity part and enabling remote villages and enabling people to connect is going to come back. Yesterday, or the day before, no, the day before yesterday, we were in this in the seminar on global satellite and aviation, talking about in-flight connectivity, which is one of the worst hit places. But one thing we were sure, when we get back to flying, the connectivity part will be very important. We're so used to this home office environment now and we now understand that connectivity is all we need to enable certain things, that it's coming back in the in-flight connectivity as well. It's when it's so important for us to feel connected. So we have to, we have to understand that some of it's coming back in a different format. We have to deal with recovery out of COVID economic situation. That's the whole part of growth plan, is actually recovery as well. And then we redefine those places where we think we can make money. And a lot of those places are defined for us. There's a lot of constellations coming up that are not threatened. There's a lot of things that have been decided in the past that are moving forward. And more than ever, we're going to support the strategy of our partners and our customers. And we see the growth coming from there. More than the uncertain things that were floating around.
Oh, interesting. So you're going to well, actually, that's always been, I think, an ethos of yours. You're going to double down on the customer. What does the customer need? How do we get it done for that customer? I think it's always powerful. Let's just to speak personally again for a minute. I mean, so you both referenced we're in this amazing, challenging time of COVID, where we're learning things and where we know that there will be a different world in some aspects when we emerge. But during this time, when we are only connected on screens, how can we show strength, is I guess the word I'd use, as leaders? How can we show leadership during this very difficult time to the people that ultimately we're responsible for? I mean, Thomas, you're living that reality every day. What do you find works?
Yeah, part of the leadership now is to acknowledge where we are, right? And not to embellish things and not to be overly optimistic, but rather realistic about the situation. And that aspect of, we talked about the situational awareness, I think is very important in showing leadership and strength. It's the defining well, your surroundings and your environment, and if we do this, this happens, and if we do that, that happens, and all of these mechanisms that create your environment, and showing as a leader this situational awareness of, we understand what we're doing, even though the world may fall apart around us, and bringing comfort to your team in that way, so that everybody kind of knows which role to play. I think that's one of the strengths that we have. That's our role basically today. And it can be very motivating as well to understand the different drivers and to see, how can we react and of course have an open discussion about that. I think this is one of the things that we need to do really well.
So in a way, we almost, even though we're dealing with each other through digital bits, but we need to stress the human connections during this time. That'd be another way of saying. Oh, I mean, I like your phrase, situational awareness, very much. You don't want to appear to be clueless at a time like this. But it's also about just stressing the humanity of our connections through all these digital bits flying around.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more than ever, we actually, start a conversation with, or start an email with how are you doing? How's your family in this situation? How are you? I mean, I had a COVID test yesterday. I talk about these things. I was negative, by the way. I talk about these things to colleagues, and so that aspect of how are you? How's your family? Where are you? What are your plans becomes very, very important at these times. Yeah, it can bind us together. We're all together in this situation, so it's a binding element. Absolutely.
Something I become very conscious of, whenever you're engaging with people, however it might be, it's really important to realize that there's a beginning, there's a middle, and then there's an end. And you have to have a proper beginning, and then the middle is usually the part we focus on, and then you have to leave people the right way. And it's I've become very aware of it because of this medium. So Nicole, you have to, I think this is actually, when we were talking about it, this was a topic that you brought up, showing strength, showing leadership to the people that we're responsible for. What have you learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. What Thomas had said as well. Just remembering that we're all people at the end of the day. The numbers matter, of course. Performance matters, delivery matters, but not nearly as much as the individual men and women on our teams. There is that human element that's so beautiful in our industry, and I think the COVID-19 pandemic has brought that into more of an acute view. Certainly in the satellite industry on the operator side, we're not touching the equipment every day. Once it's launched, it's about what we're doing here on the ground. And that's obviously that's work being done by individuals. So I think that during this pandemic, the people have really shined. And I think as leaders, appreciation for who they are, getting back in touch with the individuals as members of our team. I think for most of us on video calls, we've become accustomed to the occasional dog barking in the background or a kid making a crash entrance into a video conversation, maybe awkwardly at times. But it just reminds us, I think, quickly that there are real lives, there are real hearts, there's real minds behind the colleagues that we work with. And I think as leaders, we need to appreciate that authenticity, celebrate it, and use it as a source for all of us to draw closer.
It's very counterintuitive in a way, and yet I think we're all learning the same lesson. Let's just stick with that theme of leadership for a minute. Nicole, what was your sort of first experience managing people that taught you a little bit about how to go about doing that very difficult thing?
Yeah, in the early 2000s, the first person I managed was a younger woman. She actually passed out on the first day on the job. So we ended up in the emergency room.
She passed out?
She passed out. We were standing in a corridor between two different parts of the building, and the admiral that we worked for had been walking down the hallway, and I think in the introduction of her, she had locked her knees and she was real stiff. There was nothing actually medically wrong, but she, if you ever locked your knees in those situations, all of a sudden, if you've not eaten enough, or she passed out. So long story short, I had to take her to the emergency room, and I had only just met her. But I think it immediately showed me that there's an important personal connection that has to be established. That happened in that environment. But then I think later down the road, when I started to manage a larger technical team at SES, this is when we were building our market solution centers for the different verticals at the time, and I was responsible for the government market solution center. So we were building products, we were identifying roadmaps for capabilities we would need years down the road, and there was all of a sudden, a very senior technical team I had inherited to run. And a lot of these folks, they forgot more about satellite engineering than I had ever known. So this was a quick course in appreciating that in leadership, we're always continuing to learn. It's not that members of our team look to us as some pinnacle and they will only learn from us. We're learning from them. This is a two-way street here, and we continue to evolve together. And so that was a really interesting experience. And I think when we continue to appreciate that We learn about the potential of individuals and the potential of the business as an ongoing process as leaders. That's something I've valued that lesson a great deal. Very
interesting. I wonder if that admiral went home that evening and talked about how awesome he was, because people just faint in his presence. Sorry,
yes.
Thomas, how about you? Your first experience having to seriously manage some people, and what maybe you learned from it?
Well, my first experience, I was quite young when I started managing a couple of people, and I always thought I was doing everything wrong. So I actually learned a lot from doing things wrong. I also learned a lot from watching other people manage things and deciding for myself whether that was the right way or the wrong way to do things, and looking at results to evaluate, whether that was a good approach or not. So what I was thinking I was doing right and what I was thinking I was doing wrong was I was always passionate about trying to achieve something, and so that passion and that kind of goal set and ambition was also hopefully motivating for the rest of the team to kind of figure out what to do, because I was really bad at giving tasks, right? So this is what we're going to do, and you're going to do this, and here's our schedule, and here's how we're going to divide this. But I learned a lot from that, because it turned out that the whole leadership thing and the difference between management and leadership, and that's the question you get all the time, but the difference was really about whether you're managing people or tasks, or whether you are actually giving guidance on where we're going and what's our strategy, and does everybody understand their empowerment and their role in this, instead of here's your job for the next 24 hours or 8 hours. But and that's something that I learned a lot from, the fact that you can do things wrong, and you don't have to be you don't even have to be a good manager to be a good leader. So you can make mistakes, and you can, as long as you understand what's going well and what's not, and as long as you understand that bringing clear messages and empowering people, and having everybody understand what your goal, what all the company goals are, or the market goals are, and having them figure out for themselves what their role in all of that is, and then maybe checking if they're right or not, they get it wrong. That's key. That was so much key, so much more of a lesson than understanding that I was really bad at handing out tasks. The other thing that I figured out was that I was also always evaluating people in terms of what can this person do in my team, and what is he good at, or he or she good at, and what are they not so good at, and in my head I was judgmental about that, and that turned out to be quite wrong as well, because you're talking about teams and people, and nobody's perfect. That's the whole point. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, and definitely the manager does. And it turns out that's fine. That's okay, because you can have a team of individuals that are far from perfect, but you can make a perfect team out of that. And that was a huge kind of aha moment, as we would say, that you don't have to evaluate every single individual on what they're good at. And as long as you can build a team that is perfect, you can actually build a perfect team. You'll never have perfect people in that team, but you can build a perfect team. And therefore you don't have to be a perfect manager, because you can have a perfect team. So a lot of these things came up, and they're really either those things that you can't really figure out on day one, I think, but that you have to live to have seen. But I learn every day.
A very interesting observation. I think you're, Nicole, I mean, you don't have to worry about making people perfect. You have to worry about putting together a perfect team. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. And, there's a lot of different ingredients that go into making a fantastic stew, and they're not all exactly the same. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Interesting.
Speaking of this, why did each of you agree to do this somewhat crazy thing for very busy people, which is to serve as leaders on SSPI's board, lending us your knowledge, your management ability, your personal credibility? What attracted you? What's the opportunity that you see here that you think is worth lending us some of your time, which we really appreciate? Nicole?
Yeah, Robert, one of the things that you explained to me very early about SSPI is that there's a mission, there's a spirit about making leaders in the industry. And so one of the things that I was really hoping to do and embrace the opportunity to when you welcomed me to join on the board, and then now as the president of SSPI, is to continue to advocate for diversity and inclusion in that Making Leaders campaign, but as we all should. You know, being an example of myself, of a young female executive in the industry, a STEM-related field, which is, you know, all too often not as diverse as perhaps we'd all as an industry like to see it. So it helps to give an additional megaphone to the topic, aiming to reveal the importance of maintaining that balance, those diverse perspectives and the value of them for our industry. SSPI is an unparalleled group of men and women from all different aspects of this community, whether it be from launch providers, satellite manufacturers, service providers, operators, of course. One of the things I quickly learned about this industry is just how close it is. We talked about that early on in the webinar here. And so, you know, to manage and to share those many decades of experience that's within the industry from one area to the next, and taking that to educational institutions, using it as a campaign for outreach. So those younger generations find space and satellite to be an exciting area to be part of. They see themselves, whether it's in a technical or non-technical role, they see themselves contributing in a very meaningful way within it. So very excited to join in that capacity with SSPI, and I'm hoping to do some good along those lines and kind of further the cause of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, you know, we do a weekly podcast series, and our team, in this case, Tamara Bond-Williams, our membership director, is starting to build out a actually robust set of diversity content to try to again use that megaphone, if you will, to get a little bit more serious about it than this industry has typically been. So we're looking forward to that. Thomas, how about you? This is not just you served a year as president, now you're serving as chair, so you're almost a lifer at this point. What made you agree to do all that?
Well, actually, talking about a lifer, one of the things that was attractive for me in SSPI was that it was almost spanned the whole lifetime of a satellite industry person. It was all about the people, right? This makes SSPI unique in my feeling. It's about people and the lifetime of a person. It starts with STEM and students that are trying to find their way and typically don't know anything about satellites. Maybe a little bit more now with some famous people in SpaceX and all these.
Some billionaires you're talking about? Some billionaires? Yeah, they get a lot of press.
Always, you know, showing the way forward. But still, this span of a lifetime, from STEM students to Hall of Famers, the people that we applaud for their career, and over young leaders that we celebrate every single year, and then most of our members, of course, are kind of mid-career, so we've got this whole support of a lifetime in satellite. And at the same time, we're also doing something completely different, I think. Well, not different, but related. We're trying to keep the visibility of the industry very high, right? We have a mission. We're on a mission to show what the impact is of satellite on our planet. And therefore, we try to attract people. And so again, it's all about the people. So this is the combination of these two things, and the fact that it's not about technology or a specific market as such is actually a very interesting concept at SSPI. I found that extremely motivating and bonding as well, because we are talking about people, and trying to form our little club with a lot of people in them that are again, everything from the rocket scientist to the marketeer, but we all have something in common, which is this invisible thing that enables the good on the planet. So it's for me a very attractive mission that I absolutely wanted to be part of.
Well, thank you. And you remind me that I should say that in October, as part of the Satellite Innovation Show in, well, I'd say in Mountain View, California, but it's actually, of course, online. We're going to be introducing the world to 20 of those remarkable early career people, the 20 under 35. This is our third or fourth year of announcing that group, so we're looking forward to it very much. We just finished all of the evaluations and so forth, so we're getting ready to go public with that. So I believe the date is October 6th, so I'm going to keep an eye on for. We'll look forward to having lots of people involved. Last question is really about what's next. I mean, we know that our industry is going through a huge amount of change. What's, as far as where you are sitting in the industry, what are you seeing as next? And of course, that includes this issue of emergence from the pandemic. What's going to be different? What's going to be the same going forward? Do you want to start that, Thomas?
Absolutely. It was a tough question, but it's one that I think everybody, whether you're in the management team or not, is concerned about. It's what is the new normal coming out of this, right? There is I think more than ever we can talk about a new normal. I think we all believe now that things are not exactly going to come back completely the same as they were before. We touched upon the importance of connectivity and trying to figure out what are our absolute truths and values that will be there for the satellite industry and for our companies and our families. So yeah, I mean, we will never do the things. I spend 50% of my time traveling before COVID-19 pandemic. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we know now what we can do remotely or connected like this, but we also know what we can't really do, and that where we have the joy of traveling and meeting people in person when that's necessary. And I think we learned a lot from that. Also, how we travel, how we will take an airplane or a boat or a connected car. That is all changing, and I think we've gained a little bit of maturity and maybe even peace of mind in what is possible and what is not possible, so that I'm pretty sure that we'll get out of this in a way better way, and even on a better planet. So yeah.
Is our experience, though, the experience you're outlining, though, it sort of tells us a little bit about the future of the markets we serve? I mean, I personally, without any expert knowledge, tend to agree there's going to be less travel. There's going to be fewer hotel stays. There's going to be a lot of those things are going to really change.
Yeah, and talking about the markets, again, in the overview of my market view it includes international government and U.S. defense, but a lot of the commercial markets as well. For instance, the broadcast and media industry has been hit by the absence of live events, right? Live events are very important for the broadcast industry. A lot of the live events actually dictate the use, really the initiation of new technologies like 8K video, 4K video. Then there's the Olympics, the live event of the Olympics. That's when those type of investments kind of kick off, and we've lost all of that, and it may not immediately come back because a lot of the live event world is suffering a lot, so they will not invest in the short future. We talked about in-flight connectivity, where that is we think that's not going to come back in the next 12 months. It may take 18 or 24 months before we were actually back on the level that we left it at. However, we are now sure that the connectivity part is actually a differentiator. While we may have been unsure in the past of whether that's going to completely break through, we see the airlines now talking about connectivity as a differentiator and to gain market share once they can recover out of it. So that has gained importance in recovery even. We talked about the government world, whether it's international in the US, how important connectivity is. We've seen budget shifts to support the pandemic, of course, as well. So we know that some budgets and some directions that we thought in the past were going this way are now changing in favor of relief. So we can look at each of those markets, those that are important to the satellite industry. Cruise ships, for instance, where we thought that the connectivity would be obviously within the maritime world, the cruise ships are in a bad shape in terms of passengers and customers, but they've been actually also deploying a lot of connectivity while they were idle, taking advantage of that. And they actually needed a lot of connectivity to get their personnel home because they couldn't fly home. So they started using low oil prices and started, kept on going, but with their personnel and tried to get people home. And all they wanted to have was good connectivity and low oil prices.
I think it's a profound, and I haven't heard anybody else say that. I think it's a profound insight that this new world is going to be connectivity centric in a way that will, a year ago would have seemed unimaginable. And that's one of the good news story. Nicole, how about you? What's your view of us coming back from this and how the world is going to be different, I guess personally, but also in terms of the markets?
Yeah, I think, we are in a period of immense change. We've learned so much across this industry during this time that we need to remember to apply that into the future. And I think that will help shape the next chapter for this industry. Connectivity, as you and Thomas both had mentioned, if you look even just last week, UNICEF released their report that cited roughly 30% of school-aged children worldwide don't have access to platforms that would allow them to connect and continue their education. None of us should feel comfortable about that. So getting back into our core, why are we doing this? Why is it meaningful? Are we doing things that ultimately leave a situation better off than how we found it? I think we can use the hard-earned lessons that came out of COVID-19 and apply it for the next chapter. I also think it's time for this industry to evolve from a place of us versus them to a place of partnership in our core. In that way, you hear so much about various NGSOs versus GEO, the LEO versus the MEO versus, what's going up next, what's better. I think appreciating that there's a tool for every job. And they may look different. There's actually room in this architecture for a variety of different capabilities for many good reasons. And so I think that the sooner we can appreciate that fact and come together to offer a combined value to populations who need us the most and to serving some of the critical connectivity needs of customers who have some of those more unique requirements, the better off we'll all be. Customer set, the industry as a whole, and we have some valuable experience here to take from a negative experience with COVID-19 and bring it to somewhere quite beautiful and positive.
We're going to leave it there because we've been together now for about 40 minutes. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us and sharing your insights, both personal and professional, with members of SSPI and all the others who will be seeing this. So I want to thank you both very much for that time.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
And thank all of you for joining us for High Achievers in Turbulent Times. In our Making Leaders series, we take time away from just business plans and technology roadmaps to focus on the people making a difference in this business. We thank our members and content sponsors, Airbus Defense and Space, AVL Technologies, EchoStar, Eutelsat, Hughes, OneWeb Satellites, Pearson, Planet, SES, and ST Engineering iDirect for making this program possible. We hope you will join us for the Future Leaders Celebration, our online version of what we've always called the Future Leaders Dinner, where we'll be introducing you to the 20 under 35 and our Mentor of the Year. In the meantime, you can follow us on Twitter at SSPI, or on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can just search for Space and Satellite Professionals. We're the only one. If you're not a member, I encourage you to become one by going to www.sspi.org/join. And for SSPI, and for all of our members around the world, this is Robert Bell.